Welcome back to Scoreboard now. We are still taking your comments at Bernard_sports, at Kchege_sports. Like I told you, we're going to have a very special guest. Special in the sense that he has won the Premier League on his first attempt with one of the clubs that has some of the most passionate fans in this side of the world. The Gor Mahia coach, Jonathan Mckinstry, is here with us. Jonathan, congratulations, first of all, for winning with Gor Mahia. They like to call the team Sirkal. Have they ever told you the reason why they call it Sirkal?
Yes, they have.
What do they tell you?
The government, they make the rules.
They make the rules that everybody else has to follow. Indeed. One time in a traffic jam, they had stopped traffic for Gor Mahia fans and the bus to pass. This was a policeman controlling it. And then one traffic a driver said, "Look, why don't you let us go?" He said, "Boss, Sirkal is passing. You come and stop them and we see." That was hilarious. But well done, congratulations. How is it to coach Sirkal? How is it to coach Gor Mahia?
Very enjoyable. I have to say it is very enjoyable. Obviously, there's a lot of pressure on the role. But one of my sort of guiding lights in football has been when you've got a choice to make of who to go and coach, pick the team where you'll get shouted at the most if you lose.
Really?
Because that means then there's expectation and there is that pressure on you. And I think, in this life you want to try and test yourself, you want to try and go as high as you can. And so, coming to Gor was an opportunity where I knew there was high pressure, but not only was there high pressure, it was in a very unique moment where the club were in a difficult moment.
Yeah, but you had seen them before, and you had seen some of the players when you were the national coach in Rwanda. You had met them before. Did you ever harbor any ambitions of coming to coach them?
Yeah, it's one of those things that's been in my head for a long time. I obviously, coming to Kogalo, it's my first experience in club football on the African continent. And working with different national teams, I've had players who've played here in Nairobi for Gor, and I've even recommended players. Jack Tuasenge was a player that Gor were looking for a striker, and I said, you should look at this boy, Tuasenge playing for Police in Rwanda. And obviously we all know how that story ended. He did very well here. But Kogalo is a team that, for me, I love a story behind a club. I love the passion of the fans, but also I love a club that has history. And I think definitely across all of Africa, you can say, Gor Mahia is a team that has real rich history, right from its inception, as the teams came together, but then right through to competing across the continent, the dominance within local football here, and some of the players that have wore that green shirt. So
you took time to read a little bit of the history of how it was formed as well, eh? But the thing is, when you came into Gor Mahia, they were not doing very well. I think at some point they had finished 8th and probably 8th in the last 2 seasons. And when you came in, they had lost a couple of games. Did it add on to the pressure?
Look, I think the pressure is always there to win. It doesn't really matter whether you've got, 20 star players or you've got 20 youth team players. If you pull on that green jersey, the expectation is for you to win, and not just win, but to win well. And so in that sense, it's no different than maybe players who play for Manchester United, for Real Madrid. It doesn't matter whether you're at a high moment or a low moment. You've got to go out and perform. Those supporters who pack the stands expect a performance. So, I came in eyes opened. The chairman said in my first week at the club, he said to me, "Coach, I think you've joined Gor in in our most difficult period in the last 2 decades. I hope you're ready for it." But for me, I came in with my eyes open. I believed in what we could do, even if it was a young team. I think the championship success has come a year early. Really for us, it was probably a 2-year project to get us back to being title contenders. But ultimately, the energy and the focus of the players and the reaction to us as a coaching staff showed us that actually maybe we can do this in year 1.
But they didn't believe so much in you in the last 2 games. And you probably knew about this as well, did you?
Well, look, I think the nature of football is, and the nature of sport is that people, there's that old saying in the UK. There's that old saying in the UK that everyone wants to eat the sausage, but they don't want to know how it's made. And so the process that goes on behind the scenes, we always had confidence. The game against Homeboys was always going to be a very difficult game. We, in fact, knew as a staff, when we looked at our final sort of 4 or 5 games, we pinpointed it as a game where just the moment that Homeboys were in, nothing to lose, everything to play for, and what it could mean for their qualification for CAF,
Yeah.
we sort of knew it was always going to be a complicated game. Very disappointed to lose it at the end, but ultimately...
Very last minute.
Yeah, we were also in a situation where we were trying to go and win the game as well. It was 2-2. I thought the game as a whole was quite an even game. They've snatched it at the end, you know, but we don't have any complaints about that. But definitely, I think we've played in other games where we've won and played a lot worse than we played against homeboys.
But tell me, so June 1st, you go in and play the Meji Derby. And this is against AFC Leopards. You've beaten them consistently for the last 11 years. And then you lose. That's okay. Then you're facing Ulinzi next, 3 days later. What did you tell the boys? What did you psych them up with? Because they've come from losing that. Really, your tempo would go down a bit, maybe.
But you know, one of the big things that we focused on is trying to take the players' view away from the result. And if you talk to any top teams, it's got to be about process, it's got to be about performance. Because we don't control the result. Yes. You know, a penalty can go for or against you, an offside decision, a red card. In sports, we know you can play the best game of your season and lose, and you can play the worst game of your season and win.
Yeah.
So performance and result are not connected all the time. What you've just got to hope is if you continually put performances in, you will get the results. Yeah. And actually, if you go back and watch the FC game, which we have done, really, like, we played well. We had 7 good chances to score, and we obviously missed a penalty. AFC, you know, and full credit to them for getting the win. I'm not taking anything away from them, but the corner kick where one of our defenders slips so that the guy's unmarked at the back post, and then the penalty kick are their only 2 chances. Gad Matthew doesn't have to really make another save. He's claimed a couple of crosses, but he doesn't have to make a save. Whereas, you know, Levis in their goal has made 3 or 4 really good saves. They've had 1 cleared off the line. You know, they've had a penalty that we've missed. And so,
yeah,
yes, it's frustrating.
That's the game of football. You take your chances, and the team that takes their chances win as well.
Exactly.
But how was it to climb? I call it a climb down. It might not be. How was it to switch from being a national team coach to a club coach? What are the challenges? And we keep on talking about how Rwanda is more organized, how it's more developed. That's where you are.
Discipline and the discipline.
Yeah, like I think there are both jobs. You know, in national team football, first of all, there's always the focus on it, and I love that. I love the pressure. More often than not, you're playing in front of full stadiums, 20, 30, 40,000 people, and that really adds an energy to it. You also have a lot of time to prepare. You know, your next opponent isn't for 3 or 4 weeks. You can analyze, you know, 101 different things about them and really narrow down on how do we beat this opponent. Whereas at club level, you've got 3 days until the next game, maybe 1 week. The downside is at national team, you have your players for 3 or 4 days, and most of them are flying in from all over the world, so they're fatigued, you know, they need recovery. So you've really maybe only got 3 training sessions to prepare them to take on another top nation in the continent. And then you come to club football, you've got them every day. You can keep them on late. You can do a second session in the afternoon if you want. So, you know, for me, I love both in different ways, but being out on the grass is what any coach will tell you is what they love the most about the job. And so in that club environment, you get to do that and you get to work with some amazing people.
Okay. What do you make of club football in Africa? I mean, we know in Tanzania you can have as many as 9, 10, 11 foreign players and playing at the same time. And I think every country employs their own rules. In Kenya, you can have 5 on your team, but only 3 at one time on the field. What do you make of that in terms of developing football in the world? Yanga just the other day were in the finals of the Conference Cup. We know that Tupuizo Mazembe has been to the World Club Championships, but that's because they can put 11 foreign players, just like in Europe. In other countries, it's controlled. What do you make of it?
Yeah, I think it's an interesting one, really, because ultimately, you know, what responsibility do the clubs have to national development of the players? You know, in essence, clubs are private companies, private organizations who, you know, they're a business. They want to make money, they want to be profitable, they want to be successful. So for them, they would say, let us sign players from anywhere in the world. And even, you know, it's hard to maybe compare it to the European model, because in Europe, okay, you can't sign from anywhere in the world unlimited, but you can sign from anywhere in Europe unlimited. So, you know, a French team could have 20 Spanish players if they wanted to. Yes. And so it's a bit more open there. But I do think, you know, I think certain countries have went away and said, look, we have to have a certain amount of young players in the squad. Maybe we have to have 3 or 5 under 21 players in a matchday squad. You have to have a certain number of domestic players. I do think having as many, to be able to field an entire team of completely foreign national players, I don't necessarily think that's the way to go. I understand why teams do it, but then it doesn't give you any incentive to develop your academy programs, because you even look here, like the CAF licensing simply says you have to have a youth team. You know, and a youth team can be an under-21s team. But really...
Now you have to have a women's team.
Yeah, but really in terms of football development, you want to be having players attached to your club, at least informally, if not formally, from the age of at least under 14, so that you can start developing them in the club structures, in the club DNA. Whereas if you're just going out and picking players up when they're 19 years of age, you have no impact on their development. They already are who they are.
Yeah. So do you have such kind of a program in Gor to?
Well, I was just going to ask you. I mean, you just attached yourself to Akakoro now, haven't you? And I think they have the under 19. They have the under 23. Do you think that's the correct way to go now for Gor Mahia?
So I think for us, for me, I come from a youth development background. So before I moved up, I've been in the program for just over a decade now. But before that, I had a decade in academy football at various levels. And so for me, the need to develop players is paramount to long-term success. And you even look at Gor, someone like Alpha Onyango, who seems like he's been around for a long time, but he's still only 22, 23 years of age. But it's because Gor brought him in as a young player. Now, for me, I think
it was forced on them because they had an embargo on signing of players. That's why they had to use young players. So are you saying this is a blessing in disguise for Gor Mahia?
Look, I think 100%. You know, it was one of the things that attracted me to the club this season was that there wouldn't be any pushback, because sometimes when you put a young player in, people are like, oh, you shouldn't play that young player. But if you have that 6 months where, take Paul Achuga, for example, our young right back, 18 years of age, yet he's probably started 20, 21 games this season in a championship winning team. And he often at times has kept Philemon Otieno, our captain, out of the team. But, here's a player who I think can go on and win 100 caps for the Harambee Stars. He is a top quality young player. Not to put too much pressure on you, Paul, but you've got the talent. But this is the reality of it, and to give those guys a chance. But you know what? For me, coming into the club, that would always have been the case. I've given 16-year-olds international debuts. For me, if I see young talent is like a flame. If you don't feed the flame, it will die away. Yeah. But if you feed it, it will grow and it will burn bright.
But now we are going into Continental soccer now.
Yes,
so you have won with the young players. Now you're going to the Champions League. Chances are almost 90 to 95% that you will encounter an Egyptian team. You'll encounter a Moroccan team. I don't know what happens with the draws. It's always Al Ahly, always Zamalek.
Before you go into the group stages.
Anywhere else. Why?
And then the money is in the group stages.
And that is going to be a challenge for you because you've got young players who you're developing. But these who you will be playing are those businessmen you're talking about. They want to win. They want nothing else.
They know the money. They know what's involved in it.
Yeah. And so, look, for us, it's about getting the balance. Like, look, I'm not going to sit here and say we're not going to go into the transfer market now. We obviously are. We're not going to make wholesale changes. We're looking at bringing in 5 or 6 quality players. But on the same side of that, I'm saying to our executive, not only do I want to sign these 5 or 6 real top quality players, but I also want you to, lock down this young talent on 4 or 5 year contracts.
Let's start at the beginning. Are you now allowed to sign? Because has it been lifted now? Everything is okay now?
Yeah.
Okay. So you're saying you want to bring in at least 6 very experienced players?
4 or 5 really top players. Like, it's for us, the nature of football is people will go, and we'll probably have people leave from the back end of the squad, and we'll add people to the front end of the squad. Yeah. So it's going to to be successful, you've got to have at least 16 players who are really competitively competing for the starting 11. If you have less than that, it's difficult. We expect we will have 16 to 18 players who, no matter who starts in the 11, will be comfortable. And then you have that extra, 6, 7 players beyond that who are development projects, who are players for the next 2 or 3 years.
What's your most memorable experience with Gor Mahia this season? Whether on the field, off the field, because things happen in this league, we know, and especially if you're coaching Gor Mahia or FC Leopards. A lot of things happened. What was the most memorable?
Do you know, I think
have they taught you to speak Luo yet?
Oh, they try. Languages have always been a challenge for me, if I'm all honest.
You're going to sing some of us songs in Luo, don't
one or two of them.
You know, when they chant, you have to
I'm
be
sure you know.
I know the anthem. I know the anthem. Yeah,
but you also know when they say Gor Mahia, I'm sure you know the refrain. Yeah, and all that. Do they teach you that?
A little bit. They try, but they try. But
what has been your most memorable experience?
I think there's been some really huge moments in the season. Going away to Mombasa, because we knew that we would have to let Bandari have it a little bit.
So you flew in on the morning of the game?
Yeah, flew in the morning.
Well, that's the only way to beat the humidity then.
Yes.
Yeah, and so we went, and it was just one of those games. You came off the pitch and you had a real feeling that this is...
It's going to go to work for you.
This is where we're really starting to kick into top gear. You know, we'd done so well in the first leg of the season. We were top at the end of the first leg. The second leg in any KPL season, you know, anything can happen. You know, there's crazy results happen. Sometimes there's walkovers handed out. You know, anything can happen in the KPL in the last sort of quarter of the season. So going to Bandari and getting that win, I think that's maybe where a lot of the players really started to believe, okay, hold on, maybe there's something more than just competing. Maybe we can go the distance.
You mean that was bigger than beating Homeboys in Bukungu? Because you did beat Homeboys.
That was quite early in the year,
in January,
though. Yeah, it was quite early in the season. And so going there, look, it was a big result.
Yes,
but you come away from that and you've still got, I don't know what it was at the time, maybe 25, 26 games to go. So you enjoy that in the moment, and definitely it made that bus journey home that night seem a lot shorter than the 11 hours it was. But yeah, so it was a big game, but there's so far to go still. Whereas with Bandari, you probably only have a third of the season to go. And so really you're thinking, actually, maybe this is possible.
This is possible now.
Yeah. But when you had Madari, then what happened when you played Madari?
That's a good question. Look, it's just one of those off days. I genuinely think this season we've had sort of two games where we were really sort of poor. Mathari was one of them. Because even in the other games we lost, you know, KCB when we lost 1-0, actually I thought we dominated the game and had a lot of chances. Same with AFC, we had a good game. But I do think the Homeboys game, we weren't at our best. And the Mathari game, we lacked urgency in the game. That was the key thing. We just lacked urgency.
But you're fixing all this in readiness for the Continental. That's
because that's the main thing now.
No, exactly.
You've conquered local. Now the big thing, where the real money is the Champions League.
Yeah, and look, for us, that is the target. Can we go through? And I've said this already. We've got to go win that first game. You know, let's not get ahead of ourselves, because we also have to understand where we are. Is that what the ocean we're swimming in now? You know, a lot of people have said to me about our neighbours over in Tanzania, Yanga. But even speaking to the CEO of SportPesa at our breakfast the other day, they obviously sponsor Yanga as well. Yes. And he was telling me, he was saying, Coach, Yanga's income from sponsorship is around $4 million from different sponsors. Wow. Another $1 million in gate receipts. So before you even talk about prize money from winning competitions, they've got $5 million to spend. You know, I can tell you that's probably 7 or 8 times at least what Gor has. And Yanga aren't even the biggest fish in that pond.
Yes,
so
they Simba, of course.
So we've got to go.
The fans are very passionate about the game there, so that's what happens. Okay, Jonathan, what else do we have to talk about you yourself? What do you do when you're not coaching soccer then?
Do you know what? I'm a big sports person. You know, I love sports of all types. You know, I'm a big motor racing fan, Formula 1.
Motor racing. So you watched the WRC then, you did?
I've seen a little bit of it, unfortunately, because obviously with our game.
He was focusing on their game.
We were playing.
Sunday.
So you don't even know that Sebastian Ogier won this?
I'm not aware of that. I did actually, but you know, when I lived in Rwanda, they used to have legs of it there. I would go to the legs of it there with some friends. But, you know, big Formula 1 fan.
Formula 1, so it's in Austria this
weekend. You know, big rugby fan as well. Football, tennis, Wimbledon's obviously starting next week.
To let you know that the Rugby World Cup is coming, the Junior Rugby World Cup is coming.
I saw that, the under-20s is in mid-July.
I hope it's not going to distract you. Why don't let's take a look at what's going on over the weekend then. Maybe Jonathan might find something interesting now that we are on the break, because we take the fixtures of what's going to be happening over this weekend in Kenya. And I think there's a couple of events.
Yeah, you see, first on Saturday we have the FKF Cup finals.
Yes.
That's Tusker versus the Homeboys.
Yes.
And you know, Homeboys knocked these guys.
You know, I'm sure Jonathan is very happy he's not in this one now. He's resting.
And now these two teams, all of a sudden, one of them must win, because it's only through that gate that they'll play.
No, this has to be won.
Continental,
I mean, up to the
Continental
end.
football.
Absolutely, this has
So,
to be
so
won.
there's that allure.
All right,
There's
okay.
that
So
allure.
there's the FKF.
And then, of course, on Sunday, there is the Nairobi City Marathon.
Ooh, that's going to be on the expressway.
Sunday, yeah. So the expressway is closed and all that.
Okay.
But happening now, started this morning, there's the boxing trials
Oh, that's
for the
going on
Olympics
at,
team
at the Charter Hall?
At the Charter Hall for France.
Okay.
Now, remember, last time Kenya had 4 boxers in the Olympics. This time, they have been promised. Remember, the CS Sports promised to take them to Cuba for training. So there's a big... for the Olympics.
Pardon me for laughing. Let's just talk about the trials. So, the trials are going on, I think, they started today and tomorrow.
Today, yes.
And tomorrow, okay.
And until Saturday.
All right, we got a couple of AFCON matches as well that are playing tomorrow. Guinea versus Ghana at 2300 hours. Congo versus Morocco also at 2300 hours. And then on the 1st of July, Niger versus Mali and Gabon versus Egypt. Are you watching the under 23 AFCON?
I have to be honest, I haven't caught any of it yet.
You
but
haven't yet,
I will now in the latter stages of it. Just again, like you said, very focused on the game
Absolutely.
of the weekend, and sort of now.
We have to give that to you. You have to really rest as well and prepare for what's coming up. But when you got the under 23 championships, it means that then you can prepare the youth teams better and have people who are transitioning into the national teams, into the senior team.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And from my experience at international football, in 2 of my roles, I've also been responsible for the under 23s, and I think that's very important because it is that staging ground. I think a lot of people think, oh, there's a talented 19-year-old, a talented 20-year-old. He should be able to be elevated straight to senior international football. And sometimes it happens, but it's difficult. So having that category where it's not quite youth football, but it's that bridge into senior football, and especially at international level, where players can get that exposure. Scouts are watching from all around the world. Potentially they get that transfer to help boost their development again. But as you say, allowing coaches and national team staff to work with players in maybe a more age-specific environment.
So for Benson Omala then, were you happy that he was in the national team, or were you happy that he wasn't called to the national team the first time?
No, look, Benson's a player who this season has exploded. He's a player you've got to understand how he plays. I know some people say to me Benson should do more in the game. But actually, when I first came, the first game I watched him play, he was dropping back into his own half to touch the ball. And I pulled him aside and I said to him, it was like an exhibition match in Mombasa 2 days after I arrived, and I said, stop doing that. I said, because if you want to be a supreme goal scorer, you have to focus on that box, that imaginary box behind the centre backs, and get into it as much as possible. And he's done that. He's touched the ball less this season, and he's scored 26 goals. And so for me, I really want him to play. Every coach has their own preference, but for me, he'll always be, a first
Coach,
pick.
one word, because I'm being told we are already running out of time. Just one word. How far do you think you're taking Gor Mahia in the Continental Championships?
I think we can get to the group stages.
Group stages?
Yeah.
The money stages?
Yeah.
Okay. That's a promise. It's been made here on ScoreBoard today by Jonathan Mckinstry, the coach of Gor Mahia, who've just won the Kenya Football Federation title. They've won the National League title. So congratulations to them. Congratulations to Jonathan as well, and we wish you well as you go forward. And thank you for having kept us company. I've got your comments. I can't read all of them. They're all wishing Gor Mahia the best, saying Gor Mahia is the only team in Africa that can go far. Gor Mahia is the only team that has all the numbers that you need in terms of funds. Gor Mahia, well, a lot of words in Luo as well, Kogalo, Mayenga, and very many other names that are being called to mean that Gor Mahia is the greatest. We'll talk again next week on ScoreBoard. We've got to go now. Thank you for your company, and goodbye for now.
KTN News.